there along with the turn of phrase, and the land of song and all that stuff. So although we weren't Welsh, we were connected to Wales and we understood the way things were. So, the people perhaps listening in the southeast of England, this will all sound a bit strange, but if you're from Wales, north or south, even today, this sort of stuff is part of your life.
And in Wales, the local church was down about 50 broken steps, and it was in a garden shed, a massive garden shed, and that was the church. When you got in, it was like a proper church.
And how did that tie in, though, with Orthodox religion, with chapel?
Well, people went wherever they wanted to go. You have some people went to Sunday school in the day, Christian Sunday school or Sunday school, and then they went to spiritual church in the evening. So it was just a part of life. And when you were saying about tea leaves, your granddad read tea leaves. We always call tea leaves, cards, whichever you use. We always call them a tool. And it's just something you got the gift. You can see without the tea leaves, but it's the way of guiding. It's the way for the person to be guided with.
I mean, look, we were never sure about the tea leaves thing with my grandfather. He believed that he had something, and people used to go to him, but none of us were really sure.
But the people who went to him, I bet things did turn out that he said, because they wouldn't have keep on going back to him otherwise.
No, I think it made. I think it stopped them from starving during the Depression. I think probably partly. So look, it's not the easiest road to tread, is it? When you think that you're different, and when things occur to you, you must first of all. Well, maybe you do. I mean, if it was me, I would start to think, am I okay? Mentally, am I all right? Am I having hallucinations? Is there something wrong with me? Did that ever occur to you?
No, because I was brought up with my grandmother and my mother doing it, so it was never unusual for me. It's not. My brothers don't do it. My aunties and uncles don't see, but they're all, my cousins, everyone, are very spiritual minded, all of it.
And how did when you started doing these things as a young guy, how did your family treat you? Did they start to treat you differently because it was in the family anyway? But
no, my cousins will ring now and ask me questions. If they got problems, they'll ring up and they'll ask me the answer and if I can help them. My aunties. So I've never been treated. They're very proud of the way I pushed myself and the way that I've carried it on and made more of it.
What worries me about it all is that I know a lot of people who purport to do this in various parts of the country. And some of those people, I don't really think should have set themselves up to do this, because the quality of what they say, I don't think is particularly good. But nevertheless, they get a local mystique and people like to go and visit them, and they pay over there, whatever it is these days. It probably would have been £5 when I was a kid, probably £20 now. And they come away happy. I personally have great misgivings and concerns about that people are entrusting, their direction. They're asking for advice from maybe somebody who is not qualified to give it.
I've seen people, I've gone to see people and they haven't got a clue what they're saying to me. And if they can't give me direct proof about things from my past or my loved ones from my past, I know straight away they can't read me. So all of us, we all got people that say they are and they're not. And it takes a big responsibility when you stand on a platform and do it live to people. That's when you know someone is true. If they can do it live, they can pick people out of the audience and they can tell those people they past, they present. That's when you know the medium is true. I've worked with many mediums and I've taught many people. But I've had people thinking after they come to me for about 2 months, will think they can do it all.
All right, I'm going to put some calls on to you after we've taken a commercial break here. The world is full of skeptics.
Yep.
You know that I am professionally skeptical because that is my job. We've got a tweet in from Jason, who's a regular on this show. Jason says, if this man is what he purports to be, get him to describe my house. Now, I don't know whether you can be put on the spot like that. You haven't met him, you don't know him?
It's normally you've got to be, sometimes you can do, but normally you've got to be with the person and you've got to give the, you've got to be with the person to get all the details off them. Because otherwise we would anybody could just ring us up and say, tell us this, tell us that. But you have got to be with the person to read them properly.
Right. Of course, there will be people who say, well, that's a cop-out.
Well, no, I can do it by Skype. I can do it by the voice on, sometimes on the telephone. But everybody tries to put you on a stand and try to make you crumble. But if they wanted to read, and I always say, if they want a challenge, come and see me, and I will give them a read, and they don't have to pay me. I will prove to them, and they can come back.
All right. The regulatory requirements that we work under in British broadcasting require me to say that we are offering this to you as entertainment. That's what it is, and that is the light in which you should see it. Where do I live?
London, no.
Well, yes, around it. What sort of a place do I live in?
I want to say more of a flat area.
Okay.
Like London is, a lot of flats around.
Okay, and is it smart?
By the look of you, no.
No. Spot on.
But you can't judge a book by a cover.
No,
but actually, I do feel you're a bit messy around the place.
Okay, well, that is I hope that is truer than you will ever know. It's much in need of refurbishment. Now, that just might be a guess, based on the coffee-stained T-shirt that I'm wearing tonight. Or there may be something more to it. Lee Wybird is here. He is a medium, he says, from South Wales, living in London and working here very successfully. We'll be talking more with him in just a second here on The Unexplained at Talk Radio.
Election 2017. Join the conversation party.
Yes, of course, at once.
Talk Radio.
Listen. Do you hear that? That's the sound of nothing. Sounds nice, doesn't it? At Ford, we like the sweet sound of nothing too. That's why we now have 0% APR representative across our Ford car range on 3-year Ford options. Visit your nearest participating Ford dealer today. Ford. Go further.
Retail only. Vehicles to be contracted from April the 1st to June the 30th, 2017 and registered between April the 1st and September the 30th, 2017. Finance subject to status. Guarantees may be required. Free post Ford credit. Excludes selected models. Please contact your Ford dealer for more information.
This is the sound of a man who unexpectedly fell into cold water and instinctively is trying to swim hard. This is the sound of the cold water shock, making him gasp uncontrollably and breathe in water until he drowns. Whereas this is the sound of a man who fell into cold water and knows how to survive. You have to fight your instinct to swim and just float until the cold water shock has passed and you can control your breathing. This is a safety message from the RNLI. Float to live. Visit respectthewater.com.
Say you're a year into your contract and the hot new phone is released, but you're not allowed to upgrade without paying through the nose. Let's just say you're not best pleased. But say there was a new mobile company, one that lets you swap your old phone for the latest one every 12 months, free of charge, delivered to your door. Well, say hello to Sky Mobile. Sky, believe in better.
Free of any early upgrade, admin and delivery charges. 24-month interest-free loan with data plan needed for each new phone. Trade-in value credited to existing loan. Subject to status and availability. Terms apply. See sky.com/swap help.
Talk Radio. Listen, phone, talk.
Talk Radio.
We'll get you talking.
The Unexplained with Howard Hughes on Talk Radio.
We're going to get to your calls for Lee Wybird, 0344 499 1000. Please don't ask him to communicate with your Uncle Fred. It's not what we can do on the radio, but you can ask him about what he says he can do. That's fine. One question from a friend of mine, Paul, who's tweeted in. He says, ask Lee if there is a physical sensation when connected to spirit, if indeed that is what you do. And if there is, how does it feel? Now, I've interviewed mediums who've said it's a little bit like a tingling, and it's just it's a tingling, but it's also the sense of a presence.
It's the most amazing feeling. I know before I go out on a stage performance if they're with me or not because all of a sudden it's like a presence come in, but they come in with the most amazing tingling feeling from head to toe.
And if it's a bunch of people who are skeptical
Yeah.
and who think, this guy's a charlatan, what am I doing here? I'm only here because my friend said, come along here for a laugh. Now, you must get audiences like that.
Of course you do.
What's it like for you being out front of the crowd like that?
Of course, you go to somebody sometimes and you say, I got this, that, and the, you've got these different things, and they say, no, and then they come up to you in the break and say, sorry, I didn't want you to say it in front of me. But what I do now is, if I know they're testing, I will give them something that really cuts to the core. And then you see by the expression on their face, and then they want to communicate with you. Then they want the answers off you. So you always know if someone's in there to just make fun, and I'm big enough to take them on when I'm on platform.
Well, I'm sure about that. I had a little phase in my 20s, and being in the business that I'm in, it's all about fate and how it's going to go, and you're always thinking, will I be able to continue doing this? When I was 22, 23, when I was the age of my producer, Emma, who's about that kind of age, I was always thinking, am I going to get the big break? Am I going to do this? Am I going to do that? Am I going to end up playing records on the radio? Am I going to go towards news, which I ultimately did? It was all about that. And I had a phase of medium and psychic shopping in the Liverpool area. I used to go and see anybody. I would pay them £5, £10, £15. And I've got to say, the best thing I ever did was stopping doing it, because the stuff that I was told wasn't relevant. There were people who I'd go and I'd ask them, am I going to get that big job that I'd gone in for? Which is a stupid thing to do, because I don't think you should put, your fate in anybody's hands, really. You've got to live your life. If you want to get some peripheral information, it's interesting. But like I said at the top of this, don't live your life by it. I probably went to half a dozen people around Liverpool, various parts, and it was all garbage. And in the end, the very point at which I stopped going to see people was the point at which I got offered the job that I wanted.
Yeah.
As soon as I made the decision, I'm not going to do that anymore. Now, whether that's somebody up there saying, you need to live your life, or whether it really was all garbage, which is why I think people need to be massively cautious when they go into this. What do you think is the mindset that people should have when they come to see you? I'm kind of turning it round on you now.
My speciality I like doing is bereavement, because I like showing that there is after, and I like showing that there is proof. I have people coming to me about careers, about money, but everything. I have people coming to me about everything, and I can give them, I can guide them. I can't live their life, but I can guide them. You
say that you can guide them. I hear what you say. I think is what I'm saying here. The afterlife thing, of course. Anybody who's lost, and we are all destined to lose those closest to us.
Of course,
even if we think that those around us are invincible and that everything as it is now will go on forever. Sadly, that is not the case. It is the way of life that we lose people. When you get somebody coming to you who is bereaved recently, and they want you to give them proof that whoever it is okay, and still is aware of them, what do you do? I mean, if it's fairly recent, do you even agree to talk to them?
Yeah, because they need me. So I will. I had someone come to visit me recently, and this is just one, and this person was big in media, and the person come through the door, they were told they had to come and speak to me, and they come in and with the intentions of, this is a load of rubbish, and straight away I brought in who passed, what they passed off, and how long they passed, and that person, for coming in through the door and saying I can only stay 10 minutes, wanted to stay with me 2 hours. So I do give them a lot of proof.
But one of the things, and I'm guilty of this, because I had my little phase, like I say, of seeing a lot of people who do, is that when you get into conversation, and if we're in the media, we're conversationalists, that's what we do. Whether you want to or not, you give things away.
No, so some people sit there with their arms folded and don't want to say anything to you. So they put you on a good test. And that suits me fine, because I will bring them, I will not bring them down, because I don't want to bring them down, but I will bring them a lot of proof in. So they can sit with their arms folded and go, But I will bring the proof into them. Go on, sorry.
No, I've got a question in from Andrew, who texted to say, is it possible to have somebody else's dream, to to dream on behalf of somebody else?
I don't really go into dreams at all. A lot of people do. I travel around the world and I go to certain countries and they're all about dreams, and they'll say, I had this dream and I think this is going to happen. I personally don't go into dreams.
Well, that's prophetic dreams. That's something else. A lot of people report that when somebody around them has passed, they will see the person who's passed in a dream.
Yes, some people can. I've seen people in dreams, but I would prefer doing it with my eyes open when I'm wide awake.
I mean, look, when my own mother died, and I've never known what this was, it may have been me reassuring myself. The mind is a strange thing, and we can do things that, we're not aware of. But my mother died, and I was distraught. She and I were incredibly close. And the night after she died, I was inconsolable, and I had a dream. My mother came to me and she said, "Are you all right?" She was asking about me. Yeah. I wanted to know about her. And as soon as I assured her in this dream that I was okay, she faded away.
Yeah.
Now, thinking back now, it's 11 years since this happened. My thought is that it was just my mind creating something that would reassure me. So, I wanted to communicate with my mum. Our relationship was cut short. We didn't have a chance to have everybody says this, the final conversation that we'd wanted to. Our last conversation, she was in hospital. I said, "I love you." She said, "I love you." And at least we left like that. But there were a million things that I wanted to talk to her about. And I felt that I was cheated of that last conversation. This is not unique. A lot of people have been through what I'm talking about now. But I think what happened to me by having that dream was probably not my mum coming to me from spirit, but it was my mind giving me something that would ease my pain.
No, I believe it was your mother coming through, because it's the only way your mother could communicate with you. Because if you had a vision now of seeing, or of seeing your mother while you was awake, you would have said no. But your mother communicated with you through your dream, and you remember every detail about it. So if somebody said to you, "I've got all these things to say to you about your mother," you poo-poo it when you're wide awake, but you haven't. You've accepted it.
I have to say, I did interview one medium, and I did mention that at that point I'd only fairly recently lost my mother, and this medium gave me a description of somebody who was nothing like my mother. Your mother was a very tall woman, wasn't she? My mother was not a very tall woman. She always wore dark clothes, and she always wore light clothes. So you see that this is a bit of a minefield that is fraught with all kinds of difficulty. Yvonne here says on a tweet, and I agree with you, Yvonne, be discerning about who you go to, because it can be addictive. There are some people who are addicted to going to mediums, and they keep going around till they get the answer or the communication they want. Now, what do you say to people who say, "Look, I went to see Fred down in Barry, and I went to see Noel in Newport, and I've been to see so-and-so in Swansea, and now I've come to see you"?
I've got someone that have rung me because they want me to do some work for them. And in the last year, I would say that person had been to 60 to 70 different kinds.
Well, surely the answer then that you should give them is...
I won't give them a reading.
Right. I'm glad you said that.
And if someone come to me this week and they phone me up next week and say, "Can I come for a reading?" There's nothing more I can tell them. That I've told them what's going to happen. I've guided them. They don't need to come every week. Some people are addicted to doing it every night. They'll phone people every night, and I just don't agree with it. I wouldn't phone people every night. I don't go for readings every week, every month.
You said you go. Do you go for readings?
No, I don't go. I will have a reading. If I need a reading, I will go to one of my closest friends that I know is legit, and they will tell me what. They will guide me, but I wouldn't have someone come to me for a reading constantly.
Well, that's what people who do this tell me, that you can't do it for yourself. You can do it for others, but you can't do it for other people. Which prompts that old headline from the newspapers, was it psychic goes bankrupt through unforeseen circumstances, which is one of the oldest jokes there is. We're going to get to... We'll do one call, shall we, Emma? That's my producer, just through the glass there, before we get to the break. Let's take Tracy in Manchester, and let's see how this goes. Lee Wybird, Tracy in Manchester, you're both on Talk Radio. Tracy, thanks very much for coming on. What do you want to say to Lee?
Oh, thanks. Hi, Howard. In fact, it's a great show. Thank you for taking my call. Hi, Lee.
Hello, Tracy.
Hello. I sadly lost my dad in October last year, and he'd had a stroke, and he went on for like 2 months. It was awful because I was having to feed my dad, and it was just really, really upsetting. But I remember when my dad passed away, I spent 2 days and 2 nights with him holding his hand, but when he did take his last breath, I looked up at the ceiling instead and waved to him, because I've heard people say, you know, when they've had near-death experiences, that they're looking down, everybody's looking down at them, but I was waving up at him, and I'm just wondering if you think my dad might have seen me.
Darling, your father, as your father passed, he would be staying in the room with you. So yes, your father would be seeing you waving him, and your father's presence will still be around you. Although they go over the other side, they still come back, they still watch you, and they still watch everything around you. So your father most definitely seen you, sweetheart.
Oh, thank you very much.
Tracy, thank you for the call.
Have you got shows in Manchester? I just wanted to quickly ask.
I'm going to start organising, doing a lot more stage performances, so I am going to be travelling around doing... at the moment I'm travelling overseas, but in the next year I am going to be starting travelling around and coming up towards... And actually I am coming towards Manchester because I'm going to be doing some work up there.
Tracy, thank you for your call. Lee Wybird is here, medium, and you're on Talk Radio. The kind of show that will talk about these things. In fact, there is only one show like this in all of Europe, and you know I'm rather proud of that fact. They do this kind of thing in America. We have to be responsible about these things, but I think you got the impression from Lee here that when people come to see him multiple times, asking him the same question they've asked 5 people already, you realise that it's not a good idea that that person should continue to go seeking answers from people like you.
No, they shouldn't. They shouldn't be living their life going from one person to the other.
What do you think about good and evil? Do those things exist?
I believe yes it does. I was asked to do. I always work with the good, with it. Well, I call it with the light.
But is there a dark side, do you think?
You have got people that try to work with the dark side. Yes. I was asked to recently to do something, and I just got up from a meeting, and I walked out of the meeting because every time I spoke about the light, they were trying to direct me to talk about the dark, so I walked away.
And have you known people who you've considered to be possessed or haunted?
I've known things to be haunted, yes, but it's not the way people think that you go spirits flying down. But I have known places I have had to go with other mediums, and I've had to go and clean places out, cleanse them out from the.
And when you say cleanse them, is that you say a prayer, or what do you do?
You spiritually, you've got to move the dark part out. I've been someplace recently where in the last about 3 months where it was a well-being centre, one of the most brilliant well-being centres, and all of a sudden they had someone in there that worked with the dark. They didn't realise, and everything started going wrong for them, so we had to cleanse it out.
Karen, one of my friends in the United States, writes books about the Ouija board, and she has been using the Ouija board, which personally I think is a really not a good thing, and it's not something I would advise anybody do. We had one sent to us from America when I was a kid, and my mother wanted that thing out of the house, and I quite understand why. But anyway, Karen has been writing books about the Ouija board for years, and she believes that it's provided her with useful information. What do you think of Ouija boards and people who use them?
I wouldn't use a Ouija board. And what you've got to remember we use spirit boards. I call them spirit boards. Some people call Ouija boards. You've got to make sure you can protect yourself. Because when you open up to do a Ouija board, when you have these youngsters doing it, or you watch on telly when these people are doing it, they don't know how to protect themselves. They don't know how to spiritually protect everything about it. So you can allow anything in.
Well, look, there are 2 ways of looking at it. There are those who say it's all mind over matter anyway, and there are those who say that this particular device connects with a lower level of entity, and you really shouldn't be messing with that. That's another debate for another time. I noticed that you brought what I assume are tarot cards with you.
Yeah, I like them. I like playing about with them.
Right, are they traditional tarot cards?
Yeah, they're traditional ones. Yeah.
Okay, right. Oh, well, we might talk about that in just a second. You're on the Unexplained Talk Radio. Lee Wybird is here. If you have a question for a guy who is an up-and-coming medium, I don't know whether you like that description.
Yeah, that's fine. Yes.
Up-and-coming young medium. He's on this show, and he will be here for another 20 minutes or thereabouts. This is the Unexplained Talk Radio.
The Paul Ross Marginal Mystery Tour is on the road.
Dude, where's my breakfast show?
Check the oil, kick the tyres as the Paul Ross Breakfast Show takes the highway to the hustings. Join the nation's brightest breakfast crew on an early morning election road trip around the territories.
It's eggs in Edinburgh, muesli in Manchester, bacon sarnies in Birmingham, blueberry bagels in Brighton, and if we're lucky, cornflakes in Cardiff.
From Highland to Hard Shoulder, Paul Ross gets into the Election Connection Cruiser and measures the mood of the nation on a week-long travelogue of live breakfast broadcasts.
Kicks off tomorrow morning live from 6 from the beach in Brighton.
The Paul Ross Marginal Mystery Tour on Talk Radio. We'll get you talking.
The Unexplained with Howard Hughes on Talk Radio.
Medium Lee Wybird is here. So you're developing this as, what are you developing this as a business? This is something that... Do you want to get rich from doing this?
No, this is my passion. I travel looking after people in around the world. I do a lot of charity work through it. Of course, I charge for readings because sometimes when you don't charge, people will keep on coming back and coming back. I've had that done to me before. They won't leave you alone. But I do a lot of charity work with them.
Because you will have heard this one before from sceptical journalists who will say, if this is a genuine gift and you think it's of use to people, then you should be giving this. You know, Spirit would want you to give it, and you're taking money for it.
I do churches, and I don't take money off churches. I do charity events. I also do a lot of work for myself. I'm just opening up my own clinic to help people, which is all charity for myself.
You were a friend of somebody who was on this show a lot, and you know he became a friend of mine over the years because he would. This show used to be on Saturday nights, and I was a lot younger than I am now doing it, and just learning my way with it. I'd always wanted to do a show like this, and I really didn't know how it was going to. I still don't know, but I really didn't know how it was going to go. And Colin Fry supported me to the point where he didn't want to be on the phone. He said, it's all right, we'll come up. And he would come. He lived in Sussex at the time. Sadly, we lost Colin, I think, 18 months or so ago.
Listen.
And he used to come up here and he would be, not only, he'd cheer everybody up around the studio with the things that he would say, some of which we couldn't broadcast. You know, the great turn of phrase to Colin. I think what we should do, I'll let you hear this. You won't have heard this. This is a recording of Colin Fry on what was this show in this very studio about 12 years ago when this show was on TalkSport. And Colin had come up from Sussex and we were just having a good time. I think he did an hour and a half or so here. But this is Colin in fine form.
There are three ways in which spirit can communicate with us. And that's one, obviously through a medium. Secondly, shortly after they've passed over, many people have the experience of a direct communication, but this seems to be shortly after someone's passed over. And then the other way is through dreams. And if you think about it, and this is something that I think that maybe, you know, science should put some research into, is the fact is that, you know, people do often talk about having these communication dreams, is that, you know, maybe in the dream state, the vibrations or the waves of the brain change to the extent that people that are normally not mediumistic become mediumistic in the sleep state. Maybe there is something that, I mean, I know from the little bit of research that I've been involved in and when I've been involved in testing, you know, it has been said that, you know, when I'm in the process of receiving communication or working with mediumship, something seems to be happening within the brain. So, you know, I would say to you, this is not an unusual experience, and there are lots of people that report to me that they have the experience of communication in the dream state.
A lot of people, Colin, experienced, in fact, I was one of those people, dreams around the time of 9/11. I had a dream about a silver plane, and it had United Airlines on the back sliding out of the sky into a field somewhere that was about 3 days, maybe 4, before 9/11.
I mean, I'm going back quite a few years ago now, but I was having very profound dreams about boats sinking just before the Zeebrugge disaster, and I got a sense of, you know, I didn't know what was going to happen, but I knew that something was going to happen involving a boat sinking.
All right, more calls. Debbie in Manchester. Debbie, you're on TalkSport to Colin Fry.
Hi,
Hello,
Colin.
Debbie.
I'd like to ask that I don't believe the spirit world is all pure and good. Has anything bad or evil ever come to you, and could a spirit possess you?
Yeah, good question,
darling,
Debbie.
what I would actually say to Debbie is that the spirit world is pure and good, just like this world is pure and good. It's the people that occupy it that are whether they're pure and good. You know, however you might believe in God, you know, or the Creator, I cannot accept that God is capable of creating anything that is intrinsically evil.
Well, that's Colin Fry on this show. In fact, sitting, I mean, it's been refurbished since then, rather like my flat needs to be, as you correctly pointed out. You know, that was Colin. Your recollections of Colin Fry, because he got it from time to time. He got a lot of good press, but he got a lot of stick from the media too, didn't he?
Well, I watched Colin doing readings, and Colin filmed in my premises, and the woman he read for was very good. And what Colin just said is extremely good. And that is a good point, because the spirit world isn't bad. And like you say, it's mankind that makes the earth bad. So I just think he was just a lovely person. And he was funny, he had a good sense of humour, and he was honest. And I watched him doing a stage performance. I'd done the same stage I was in, and he was very good on his stage performances.
And do you want to be following in his footsteps?
I want to be myself. I don't want to follow in anybody's footsteps, but I just think he was an amazing medium, and he researched a lot of things, and this is what I've been doing. I've been working with professors from America and places again. I've been researching a lot of different things.
Mm-hmm. Have they tested you out, like the guy we're going to talk to in the next hour, Gary Schwartz?
No.
The professor. So nobody's put you under test?
No.
If somebody like Gary got in touch with you and said, we'd like to put you through some proper scientific experiments, would you be willing to do that?
Yeah, no problem at all. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you have no fear of double-blind testing, that kind of
Nothing at all. I do a good thing called blindfold readings as well. I know that's different, but I've been blindfold, and I had people put their hands on me, and I've been able to give them a full reading and tell them everything about their homes, everything on blindfold. But if someone wanted to put me through a test, I'm more than happy to do it. I've got nothing to lose by it.
If you do more media, the chances that you might get offers of doing TV shows like Colin did and that kind of thing, inevitably those things change people. You know, you become a celebrity. That's begun to happen for you, just reading stuff about you today when I was researching you. You know, you get more media attention, you change. Are you ready for that?
I'm working overseas at the moment. I've been offered 2 TV contracts overseas, which I'm going to go for, and I've been offered some TV work. Nothing's going to change. I'm just going to be the down-to-earth medium that I am. I want to be known to do good more than, you know, I want to be good. I want to be a good medium, and I want to help people.
When we die, and it's the only certainty in this strange life that we all go through, it has its ups and downs for everybody. When we die, what happens to us, do you think? Where do we go? What happens in those... We had the call from Tracy about the death of her father.
Yeah.
A lot of us have been through that and that moment, and we often wonder to ourselves, what happens at the point of death, and then when you move forward, if you do from there? You know, assuming it isn't oblivion, which many people do think it is, just complete oblivion, you know nothing. What's the process? What happens?
Well, there's 2 things. Some people get stuck and they can't find a way over, and some people are a really good thing. Many years ago in Wales, there was a family who was all around the bed with their father, and the father talked to each child. There were 5 children. He spoke to each child, and then he spoke to each child, and then he spoke to his wife, and he said, "It's time for me to go." And he said, "They're all here for me," and he picked his arms up in the air and he died. And he knew that his family was around the bed, so they were there to take him over the other side. I believe, and when they pass, they don't rush off and just fly over and that's it. They stay around. They stay around their family. They watch their family. They are taken over the other side, but they brought back to be around their family, to reassure their family. They want to look after their family, so they don't just go and disappear.
Something that happened to me, which is, well, it's either a coincidence or it's amazing. I've never been able to work out which. But after my mother died, I may have told this story before, certainly on the podcast I've told it. I used to make tapes for everybody in their 20s, as I would have been. We used to make mixtapes. I don't know if you made mixtapes when you were younger.
Not good with technology.
Okay, well, I used to make mixtapes of all my favourite music and play them in the car. I had an old VW Beetle car, and I would travel to Worcester, where I was working at the time, or wherever I happened to be, and I would be playing these tapes at maximum volume, and they'd be mixes of my favourite music. I had 2 turntables, and I used to be Mr. DJ Mixmaster with these things. I would always make 2 copies of each tape, one for me and one for my mum. I had 2 cassette decks, and I used to have it like a little production facility.
Yeah.
So when my mother died, there were maybe 100 tapes there, and she used to keep them in the kitchen, and I would keep buying her new radio cassette recorders too, because she'd wear them out at a hell of a rate. She used to play them all the time. When she died, and I went to the house, and it was very quiet, and then I had to go home. A lot of people have been through this, and you will inevitably go through something like this. I picked 6 of the tapes to take back on the train with me. And then I thought, well, we're not, at that time we weren't using cassettes.
Yeah.
So I had to find a Walkman. And I found a Walkman in a shop on the way back to the train in Liverpool. I think I paid 15 quid for an old Walkman. 6 tapes with me. I couldn't bring myself on the train going back to London to play the tapes, because you know how you feel after having been through something like that. It's different. Anyway, I got to around Rugby, which if you've taken the train from Liverpool down to Euston, you know that Rugby's about 2/3 of the way down. And I picked out one of the tapes, one of them at random. I put it on the machine, and for 10 minutes it played 1980s music, 1990s music, my favourites. And I'm starting to think, well, I'm trying to get my head around the music and stuff and look out the window. The next thing, the tape is interrupted by my mother's voice saying, "Hello, Howard. You asked me to record you on the radio. I've learned how to do it, and this is it." And she put the date that she'd done the recording. Now, at the time I was reading the news nationally, I was doing the news that you'll hear at the top of the hour here. I was doing independent radio news across the nation. And I wanted to know how I would sound on various local stations. So I asked my mum if she would be able to record me on a cassette and let me know how I sounded on one of the local stations in the northwest of England, just so I understood how me sitting in London, how I would sound. Now, I told her how to do it, and she wasn't great with technology either. I never thought she would be able to do it, and I never knew that she had done it. Now, how many years had passed between her making that tape and me not knowing about it and getting on the train? What were the odds of me picking the tape that had my mother's voice on it and hearing that on the train going back after just having said goodbye to her? Now, that was either the biggest coincidence in the world.
She directed you.
But, I tell you what, when I heard my mother's voice coming over my headphones on the train in Rugby, I almost had a heart attack.
She directed. Do you know, I'd done a stage performance, a church performance, and I had brought someone back, and they died at 11 o'clock in that morning. And I got on the stage, and I brought back that person at 7 o'clock at night. So they don't just get up and leave, and they do direct us to different things. The other day, I felt quite flat, and it's very strange. My mother's name was Avril. My mother died 11 years ago, and every time I seem to feel down, I have this lady ring me from Liverpool, funny enough, and her name is Avril. And this has happened to me 3 times in the last year and a half. And I don't even know this lady at all. And she just picks the phone up and rings me. And I was walking up the street and I was just feeling a bit flat. And my phone rang and she said to me, I said, hello. She said, Lee, it's April. And I said, hello, sweetheart, you okay? She said, your mother just told me to call you because you're feeling low. And that happened to me 3 times.
Now, just to put a reality check in here, what you've just talked about and what I talked about, of course it can be coincidence, and my jury is always going to be out about what happened to me, and so we always have to ground ourselves and ask ourselves the question. I think we have to be careful that we don't buy hook, line and sinker into everything. I think we have to stay objective about these things, but we offer you these experiences and you can make of them whatever they will. Let's take some commercials right now. We'll come back with Jason, a caller from Bedford in southeast of England, and we'll take it from there here on the Unexplained at Talk Radio.
Across the UK, online and on DAB. Access all radios.
Talk Radio. Give it some lip.
Skeletor got £125 cash back at Money's supermarket, and now he feels like the world's his theatre. So, baby, remember his name! Get £125 cash back when you switch your current account to First Direct Bank. Another exclusive deal from Money Supermarket. Offer ends July 3rd. For the offer, switch via Money Supermarket using the current account switch service and deposit £1,000 within 3 months of the account opening. New First Direct customers only. See Money Supermarket for full T's and C's.
Mrs. Wren says you can't have a model home without a beautiful kitchen. And at the moment, all Wren kitchens are half price. And VAT free. Plus, you can get a Bosch dishwasher for just £179 when you buy 5 or more units. Mrs. Wren, would you describe your nest as a model home? Of course it is. It's Twiggy. Fly down to your nearest branch of Wren Kitchens.
Punching the air, Sally jumps out of her Renault Traffic van. Winning her second gardening contract feels even better than the first. Topiary has a new champion. Renault Pro Plus vans are trusted as the logistics partner to the Renault Sport Formula One team, delivering vital components day in, day out. See how the award-winning Renault Pro Plus range can power your team with reliability and aftercare service you can count on. Visit one of our Renault Pro Plus specialist dealers to find out more.
Light up the sky. Critics are calling Baywatch the biggest, baddest movie of the year.
Who's your daddy now?
Baywatch is big, bonkers, and brilliant. Whoa, hey. Have some class. It's utterly ridiculous, utterly sublime. The Rock is on fire.
No.
Yes.
No.
Yes. Mitch, no. It's hilarious and ridiculously funny. Starring Dwayne Johnson and Zac Efron. Baywatch. Rated 15 in cinemas Monday, May 29th.
Across the UK, online and on DAB.
Ian Lee on Talk Radio.
We have ways of making you talk.
Every weeknight from 10, get an earful of unusual nocturnal emissions with radio's Lord of Misrule, Ian Lee. No relation, thank God. The cactus and the tree and the rabbit on the hill.
Unfiltered Night Talk with the original king of unconventional conversation.
It's going to be awesome.
Late night Ian Lee.
Just listen and see what happens.
Tomorrow night from 10.
On Talk Radio. We'll get you talking.
The Unexplained with Howard Hughes on Talk Radio.
Lee Wyberg is a medium. Have you got a website, Lee?
Yes, it's psychic medium Lee Wyberg.
Works for me. Okay, let's get on a call. Let's get Jason on. Jason, sorry to have kept you waiting for all this time, but Lee's listening. What do you want to say?
Well, hi, Howard. Hi, Lee.
Hello.
Lee, you come across as a really gentle and kind man.
Thank you.
But I'm very, very sceptical.
Yeah.
And there is a couple of reasons. One of the reasons being is my dad is a member of the Magic Circle, and he knows how to do cold readings.
Yeah.
And I've seen him do that, and people go into meltdown because the fact is that he's reading them, and it's just all the fact that he can do that.
Yeah.
What can you say to me that would... What do you know about me? Because I was the guy who tweeted about my house.
I can't say to you over the phone, but if you wanted to come for a read, and I'm more than happy.
Well, we can't do advertising for your services here, but Jason, I mean, you know, one thing you did say, if you were the person who sent that tweet in, you said something about off air. You said to me during the last commercial break, I think it's a three-bedroom house?
Yes.
Does that make sense?
No, not remotely.
Right. Well, you know, there you go. Don't know what we make of that.
Can I tell you? I live in a reconstructed 1802 arms house, and it's built in the most bizarre and peculiar way. And I think that if someone who would known, I understand you're saying you can't do readings like this over the phone, but isn't it not better to not say that? Just say what you can do over the phone rather than not over the phone.
Yeah, of course it is. But
so what can you say to me that would? I'm not looking for to be convinced. Is there something I could just take away from this conversation?
What I can say to you, and then you can tweet into the show, is I'm more than happy for you to have my number, and you can ring me, and I will give you a reading over the phone for
All
nothing.
right, well, we'll park it at that point. You know, I mean, I do know people who say that they can do these things over the phone. We have Christian Dion here, but I know it's difficult, and especially when you're put on the spot like that. But Jason, why did you call? If you are such a skeptic, I'm just interested, just from a human point of view. Why did you pick up the phone?
for the simple reason is you have people on the show. I see people on television. I see people in the media. Yet when it comes to being questioned directly without physical contact, it always seems to be they seem to fail. And that's what my concern. And all I was asking for was just one thing you might be feeling from me. And Lee, you haven't had to do that. And I'd absolutely love you to do that.
All right, Jason.
Thing,
I take your point very much, and thank you very much for the call. I mean, look, you must hear that all the time. People want you to deliver, whether they are sitting here in the studio or whether they're in Timbuktu.
Of course they do. But if you're going to link in with everyone and just give people constantly, there has got to be a time and a place that you do it. I have done readings, just somebody chucked somebody in a room, and I've just done a reading over here, which I'm happy with. But it doesn't matter what you give to people. I could say something to him, he could say no, even if it's yes. But I'm not saying he would, but I'm more than happy for him to ring me, and I would do it for him to ring me.
All right, well, you can make that arrangement separately through Lee's website, Jason, and, please let me know what came of it all. Like I told you, I had my phase of shopping around people because I was looking for answers and I was looking for communication. God knows what I was looking for. And I came away disappointed. Yeah. And my life improved when I stopped doing it. That's just the fact.
I've had people over and over just come up to me and say, give me reading now, give me reading now. But you come to a stage that you just think, I don't have to just keep on giving readings to prove myself.
Are there people who you can't read for, who will appear and there's a block somehow?
If someone come in, they really don't want to read, and of course they can say no to everything, but mostly you can read for people.
And we come back to this issue of responsibility, and it's we only got 2 minutes now, but if you see bad things for somebody, if you're getting a message from the spirit side that tells you, and you believe you're being told the truth, that something bad's going to happen, do you keep that to yourself? You have to, don't you?
I think you've got to be very careful the way you word and tell them the way they got how to divert themselves. You can advise them how to stop something, but they don't really show you if they're going to drop dead tomorrow.
Of course, if you can advise them how to stop something, there could be the argument that it was never going to happen in the first place. During this period of shopping around, my sister recommended that I went to see somebody she went to see in London. And this woman wouldn't read for me. And she said, and this is a true story, and it still chills me to tell. Now, whether this woman was a fake, whether she was genuine, I don't know. I've got no idea at all. But she looked at me and she just said, she closed the book and she said, so many disappointments. And imagine how I felt. I was a young kid of about 23, and I walked away from that. And I just thought, well, yeah, fine, thanks very much. But I did go through years of terrible disappointments after that. And I don't think she should have, if she was connecting with something, I don't think she should have said that to me. Yeah. They say forewarned is forearmed. I'm not sure. What's your next show then? Where are you doing? You can do that.
I'm just travelling at the moment, so I'm going to be travelling for the next 6 months, and then I'm going to just do a plan of the shows that I'm going to be doing on my website. I'm going to be showing where I'm going to start doing my stage performances.
Well, good luck in all the things you do. The man that you've been hearing is Lee Wyberd, and that's Whyberd. Put him into a search engine. You'll find details of him and his life and his work there. Lee, thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you very much for having me on.
This is The Unexplained. My name's Howard Hughes. We're going to talk in the next hour to a man who has done proper scientific research on people like Lee and a lot of other cool stuff as well. Gary Schwartz is his name. He's coming next.
Across the UK, online and on DAB.
Join the conversation party. Talk Radio.
My thing, Guatemalan cortado. As coffees go, it's pretty lively. I must have smashed out 24 spreadsheets in half an hour. Boom. Which is, funnily enough, what my laptop did when I spilt my cortado all over it. Oh, no. So, I need a new one. 15-inch display, 1 terabyte hard drive, and no big price tag. Refurb it is.
Jake's thing. It's got to be a refurbished laptop from eBay. That's as good as new with 12-month seller warranty. Buy refurbished tech on eBay and save up to 50% versus new. eBay. Find your thing.
Dave, this is not the way to the ground.
please put the sat-nav on?
Sat-nav? I don't need that. I'm a human compass, me.
You won't get good odds on what happens next. But for great in-play prices on the footy, get yourself to 10bet.co.uk and score a first deposit bonus of up to £200.
David, I don't think this is Wembley, is it?
When it's time to bet, it's time to 10bet. Minimum deposit £15. Deposit must be staked in full to qualify. 5 rollovers of deposit and bonus required. Single bets and ACCAs only. Please bet responsibly.
To the McCulloch man, his McCulloch lawnmower is like the finest footballers across Europe coming together to get the job done. And the morning challenge of the tough, unruly grass facing him, that's like the local pub team. Pathetic. He'll cut them down to size long before the midday kickoff. Game over. Get your McCulloch lawnmower and other garden power tools at good DIY stores nationwide or at McCulloch.com. McCulloch, the power to get the job done.
Across the UK, online and on DAB.
A new kind of talk radio. We'll get you talking.
From the Sky News Centre at midnight, 3 houses have been raided by police in Manchester, investigating the bombing at a concert 1 week ago. 22 people, including 7 children, died in the terror attack carried out by Salman al-Baidi. 13 people remain in custody after 2 fresh arrests yesterday. Lizzie Murter was there with her daughter Olivia and says they were only seconds away from being killed.
There was a big boom, a horrendous sound, and there was a ringing in my ears. Then there was alarms going off, smoke everywhere. As it went off, there was a big, massive flash. It's like a flash of white light. All bits flying everywhere like shrapnel.
Meanwhile, thousands of people in Manchester have queued up to get a tattoo in support of the victims. The worker bee has become a symbol of solidarity. They cost £50 with all the money raised going towards the families. These people explain why they wanted to get one.
Everyone's been a bit confused on how to react, and this is just one small way of showing that we are all together as a community.
There's been this amazing outpouring of love and solidarity since what happened, and I think it's kind of carrying a piece of that with you, so that wherever you go, you know, you've always got a part of Manchester with you.
Japan has protested against North Korea's latest launch of a missile identified as being a short-range Scud. It landed in the economic zone in the Sea of Japan, but no damage to ships has been reported. More than 150 people have died in the worst flooding in Sri Lanka for a decade. 500,000 have been displaced after torrential rains. British Airways could be facing huge compensation costs after thousands of passengers were stranded over the bank holiday weekend by a global IT crash. The company has again apologised to passengers. In football, Hamilton have secured their status in the Scottish Premiership after beating Dundee United 1-0 in their playoff final second leg. It's after the first tie finished goalless. And The Square has won the prestigious Palme d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival. The film is directed by Ruben Östlund and stars Dominic West. That's the latest. I'm Kevin Gover.
The following program contains graphic audio images of the supernatural and scenarios depicting paranormal activity that some listeners may find disturbing. Views expressed in the program are solely those of the presenter and do not in any way reflect the opinions, beliefs, or policies of Talk Radio.
Untwist the lid on Talk Radio's specimen jar of the psychic, the supernatural, and the simply unexplainable. The Unexplained with Howard Hughes on Talk Radio.
Right across the UK, right round the world, this is The Unexplained. My name is Howard Hughes. If you have discovered recently this show, please let me know, and please let the radio station know that you're there. Very important for us. If you want to go to my website, check in with that. You can message me through there. Go to theunexplained.tv. That's my personal website where there's 300 hours of material waiting for you to hear there, but not right now, and a whole load of other stuff. Theunexplained.tv would be good to hear from you. Last hour, we heard from Lee Wybird, the medium, based in London, doing very well, up and coming in his field, and we'll check in with him again in the future, of course. Now we're going to talk with a man who's done some extensive research about mediums and many other topics that are very much core to what we do here at The Unexplained. You know, in this business, from what I've discovered in this field, people who do proper, in-depth academic research are fairly few, and those who do it really well are even fewer. So I'm really pleased to connect right now to a man in America called Professor Gary Schwartz. He is the Professor of Psychology, Medicine, Neurology, Psychiatry and Surgery, and Director of the Laboratory for Advances in Consciousness and Health at the University of Arizona. Gary, nice to have you on.
Pleasure to be here.
Big titles, big jobs. How would you describe what you are and what you do?
Well, it's interesting. At an earlier phase in my life, in my academic career, I focused on the relationship between mind and body. So it was called psychophysiology. But then it extended, particularly when I moved from Yale University to the University of Arizona, and added spirit. So it became mind, body, and spirit. And in the process of adding spirit to this, a more complete view of human nature and reality, I was led to the question of life after death, the greater spiritual reality, are mediums real, and so on, all the way now to our spending a good probably 80% of my research time is actually on developing what we call the soul phone. That is technology that will enable, we predict, active communication with spirit.
Okay, I want to talk about that in just a moment. You have done, though, some research on mediums. In the last hour, we had Lee Weiberg in here, a medium. In my career, I've spoken to scores of mediums of various kinds at various levels, some of them international superstars, names that you will know. Some of them, like one in particular I met in Dublin, most people outside Dublin have never heard of. But, many people, all with a similar thread in their lives. Tell me about your research into mediums. What do you make of them?
Well, it's interesting. I was raised as an atheist, and I was raised in conventional Western science, which meant that I was taught that it was ashes to ashes, dust to dust, case closed. We are physical beings having a spiritual experience, not spiritual beings having a physical experience. So anyone who claimed to speak to the deceased had to be either fooling themselves and or us. Now, I knew that there were fake mediums. There really are fake mediums. In fact, there's a whole field of what's called mental magic, and they're psychic entertainers.
And unfortunately, over the years, some people who've been quite well known, both sides of the Atlantic, have been outed by various armatures of the media or people who have made a bit of a living out of outing people like that as being fakes, yes. And the world has been shocked when they are.
Exactly. In fact, Harry Houdini was one of the first people in the United States to literally expose the fraudulent mediums of his day. Now listen, I didn't want to be fooled. So if you can't beat them, you join them. So I read secret books on how to become a fake medium. I took a course on how to become a fake medium. I'm a pretty good fake medium.
Really? And listen, is that all about asking cold questions? By asking questions to which there is an obvious answer that anybody with half a degree of savvy can actually deduce themselves?
Well, that's a piece of cold reading. Cold reading is actually quite sophisticated. There's a lot of, quote, tricks involved. But there's also something called hot reading. And this is where the medium gets a hold of the name of the sitter, the person who wants to hear from the deceased loved ones, before the reading. And then literally in the old days would have detectives speak to their family members surreptitiously, and now it can be done with the internet. So what they've done is actually gotten the information ahead of time. There are a lot of techniques. Anyway, the critical thing to know is I then designed research that invalidated those techniques. In other words, anybody who was practicing fake mediumship would fail the tests that I ran. And I've now published 4 books, if you can believe this, over the past 15 years. The first one was in 2002 called The Afterlife Experiments. And the most recent one is with Paul Davids called An Atheist in Heaven, which is a very interesting book, by the way.
How can you be an atheist in heaven? Because the very premise of it is that you don't believe in it.
Well, yes, that was part of the. What was interesting about this is that is the data about how people can change their mind after they've, quote, seen the light through their experience on the other side. And we have, as I say, scientific evidence that strongly supports this. But the bottom line is, what I discovered was that some mediums were real, and I suspect that you probably interviewed some of both the famous ones, and I've tested many of the famous ones, as well as, of course, people that we don't know. And I've also tested people who are not, quote, famous, but are nonetheless the real deal. And so once you come to the conclusion that there's a real phenomena here, everything changes.
I guess the question is, and I promise you we'll talk about your other research in our next segments to come, but we've got a nice long time to talk here. The difficulty is, isn't it, that there are so many fakes out there. Or, look, let's be generous. Let's say that there is a hardcore of fakes, but there are also a lot of people out there who delude themselves into believing that they can do this because they are very good at empathizing with people. You know, I'm very good at empathizing with people. Sure. I can there are people that I can meet for the first time in my broadcasting work, and they will feel that we have known each other all our lives in a very, very short time. And that is just the art of people. If you have the art of people, you can do an awful lot. And some of these mediums who claim that they are mediums are simply very good at people.
Yes. In fact, as I said earlier, I was concerned that they were deluding themselves or they were deluding us, either consciously or unconsciously. But the fact that those people exist, you know, you don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater. You don't want to then come to the conclusion that all mediums are fakes and frauds, which is what super skeptics do. And so the critical thing is discernment. How do you tell a genuine medium from one that's not? And remember, I started out with the premise that they were all frauds until proven otherwise. And the evidence, the totality of the evidence, forced me to the conclusion that some were real. And I've now tested over 30 genuine mediums. And the group of mediums that I work with now, I mean, they're as extraordinary, at least as extraordinary as the people that I had the privilege with working 15 years ago. And I am forever humbled by witnessing what they can do, what they can receive, and the effects that they can have in people's lives.
And what is it they exhibit and exude? What is the X factor that they have, these 30 people, the hardcore 2.5 of them, the ones who simply do not pass muster show? What have they got?
You mean the ones that do pass or don't pass?
The ones who do pass.
Okay, the ones who do pass. First of all, they have an openness to be willing to receive information, and they turn their, if you would, their judgment or their filters off. So they're open to the possibility. Because if you're not open, you're not even gonna be able to pick up the information in the first place. Okay. So a key factor number one is openness. A second is the ability to meditate, or to quote, go into trance, or to get their mind into a pure state where their emotions and the chatter in their mind, what some of them call monkey minds, are quieted. And being able to be in that space, again, increases the capacity to hear, see, and feel, hypothesized spirits. The third thing is that they've often either had traumas, or they had injuries, or there was something that happened in their lives that sort of either awakened or reawakened their abilities.
You're right about that. The number of biographies you read of these people who say that I had some kind of accident or trauma, lost a relative, or had a childhood illness.
Yes. Also, often you'll see that this, not always, but very often it runs in families. There'll be parents or grandparents or uncles that, quote, had the gift, or were very psychic, or could see the future, or and so on. So there was this. There's that element. And then there is they have a great need to be of service. I mean, most of these people, not all of them, but most of them are genuinely loving, genuinely caring, genuinely empathic people. They feel it's a privilege to be able to have these experiences, and so on.
And of the 30 people, how many of those are the household names?
Household names, it depends how you define household.
Well, there are people who tour the world. Some of them have been on this show.
Right, okay. Well, if we make household names as having had best-selling books or television shows, or have been, on other people's television shows, I would say, I never counted them, but my guess is it may be as high as 15.
So it's 50%. So really,
I said as high as. I'm not 100% sure.
Okay, so that's good. It means that this is very democratic. There are people doing it in presumably back streets, small apartments, whatever. And they're doing it with the same sort of what you would call accuracy as those people who are making a fantastic living out of it.
Yes, I would say that there are at least as many people, probably many more, who have the same skills and gifts, but are not either not household names or have no interest in being, quote, out there.
I want to talk about your other work, to be fair to you, and to get it out there. This is just an introduction. We'll do something longer on my podcast in a future edition of that. Sure. In the research in mediums, give me a couple of examples. You don't have to name any names or talk any specifics if you don't want to, of the sorts of things that have really swayed you, the sorts of information that you have been given and you thought, gee, there is no way they could have known that.
Oh, boy, there are so many.
Just kind of thing, just generally.
Yeah, sure, but let me not limit it to people who are necessarily well known, and I'll just give you examples, because otherwise I have to now filter out the people who are well known examples. But for example, I wrote a book called The Sacred Promise, published in 2011, and in that book there was a woman who is now has written a book and is a public medium. But in the book, and this is the way, therefore, I still refer to her because she preferred this, I called her Joan. And Joan was a woman who was at that time a secret medium, had been psychic her whole life. She was worked in a bank. She had a young son, happily married, and so on. But she, quote, saw spirit. She literally saw dead people. And she ended up receiving communication spontaneously from a woman who I knew when she was physically alive. Her name was Susie Smith, who actually published a total of 30 books in the field of parapsychology and life after death. And after Susie died, Susie and I became very close. One of the things that Susie vowed when she was alive was she said she couldn't wait to die so she could prove that she was still here. And anyway, after Susie passed, this woman spontaneously started receiving communication from Susie, and I put her through a very stringent test. And there was one instance where literally Susie, on the other side, brought another deceased spirit to Joan under completely unexpected conditions. And Joan then did the reading for this particular spirit, and then sent this information to me. She said this had never happened to her before, that one spirit brought another spirit and meanwhile, of course, I had never heard of this myself. She said, but Susie said, you'll know who this is. And the day before this, I had literally been visiting with a family who are Holocaust survivors, whose younger daughter, who was actually in her late 40s, who was a neurosurgeon, had just died of brain cancer. And they were deeply grieving this loss. And I was feeling badly that that they couldn't have a reading with a really gifted medium. And now, out of the blue, a medium that I've been working with, who lived 1,000 miles from Tucson, spontaneously brings up information that might be her. Well, the only way I could know whether or not this was I called her the mystery woman, was to call the older sister, who was the woman who introduced me to the parents, and told her, I said, look, I don't know if this is your sister or not, but a woman has come through a medium brought by another deceased woman. And the only way we'll know whether this is your sister or not is to actually score the reading using our objective scoring procedure. And so she agreed to do this. And there was one item, this is the one I want to tell you about, which was the tipping point for me. Midway through the reading, Joan says, this woman, I call her the mystery woman, is showing me something about eagles. She said, eagles are very important to her life. Make sure you tell the parents, and the parents will understand. Now, I'm reading this, and I'm saying, eagles? Mediums don't talk about eagles. You know, mediums are never 100% accurate, so this has got to be an error. Meanwhile, the older sister is on the other end of the phone sobbing. And you know why? Because her sister younger sister loved eagles. She loved them so much that she had paintings and photographs and carvings and statues of eagles. And at her funeral, instead of putting her ashes, she was cremated up at the altar, they put one of her favorite glass statues of an eagle. They played the song Fly Like an Eagle. They played other songs by the Eagles.
Gary, I've got the chills. That's an amazing story. I am sure that there will be skeptical listeners to this show, and I welcome their contributions always, who will say, well, that person was mining some subconscious level of your mind, but I can't see how that can be. Professor Gary Schwartz is here. We'll talk about his other work in just a moment here at The Unexplained. Stay there.
Election 2017 on Talk Radio.
The latest breaking news, expert analysis, and outspoken opinion.
And I, for one, am proud of that.
Join the conversation party.
Talk Radio.
Time for another round of Sounds Fantastic. What's this sound?
Okay, we're in. Alarm's disabled.
Nice one. Right. Where'd she keep all this camembert?
Scary stuff. That was a couple of desperate cheese burglars. Whereas this...
Go compare.
...is the sound telling shrewd listeners where to check out the cost of their home insurance.
If you want to side, it should be your favorite. GoCompare.com is right up there.
Sounds fantastic.
Score yourself a winner with The Sun. Join me, The Sun's chief football reporter, Neil Ashton, for all the latest stats, chats and spats. Our coverage is more pep than Guardiola, tackles opponents tougher than Terry, and scores more winners than our mate Zlatan. Plus, don't miss your number one football pullout. It's goals every Monday, Wednesday, Saturday and Sunday. Go on, pick up The Sun today for just 50p.
Spring collection sofas are up to half price at DFS. But you better be quick because savings on selected sofas end today. DFS.
To the McCulloch man, his McCulloch lawnmower is like the finest footballers across Europe coming together to get the job done. And the morning challenge of the tough, unruly grass facing him, that's like the local pub team. Pathetic. He'll cut them down to size long before the midday kickoff. Game over. Get your McCulloch lawnmower and other garden power tools at good DIY stores nationwide or at McCulloch.com. McCulloch, the power to get the job done.
Talk Radio. Intelligent, organic entertainment.
Talk Radio.
We'll get you talking.
The Unexplained with Howard Hughes on Talk Radio.
The Unexplained Talk Radio, the remarkable Professor Gary Schwartz, and I've still got the chills from that story about information about the eagles passed on seemingly from the other side. I'm trying to find rational explanations from that, and I'm still trying, and probably on the way home tonight to my humble little pad in southwest London, I will still be thinking, how can that possibly be? Gary...
Go ahead. I just want to say something. The reason why I give you this example is because it eliminates the hypothesis that what the medium was doing was reading my mind, because I wasn't even
You couldn't have known. Yeah.
Not only that, I had no knowledge, of any of this, okay? And it happened before I met with the parents, so I couldn't have known that. And also, this is one deceased person bringing another deceased person to a reading under blinded conditions.
I mean, I have to say, look, in all the interviews and all the research that I've done over all these decades, I have never heard a story like that. Maybe there are stories like that, but I haven't heard one.
But I hadn't heard one either. And you know what I did? From that moment on, I coined the phrase the double deceased research paradigm. And believe it or not, we have been using that paradigm for years. It's one of the ways that I test to see whether mediums are for real. Is that literally we will invite hypothesized Susie Smith, from Spirit, to bring another being to a reading medium under blinded conditions and then look to see whether or not that information can be validated.
I mean, in my mind, there are only two ways this can work. Survival after this life is a reality. And, I tend towards that belief. Otherwise, what am I doing this show for? Or the other way of looking at it, which I also entertain, is that there is a universal consciousness. We are all connected, and all information is somehow out there. And you simply plunge yourself into and out of it from time to time.
Yes.
Maybe that's so.
Yes, however, since you're asking really intelligent questions, I'm impressed, Howard, let me tell you that. Not all interviewers are as thoughtful as you, if I may be so bold.
Well, that's really kind of, I mean, look, I never wanted this to be a gee whiz show, but that's great.
But anyway, but I have to say this. Having said that, the how do we distinguish between, if you would, just an Akashic record or some vast library, universal library, storage of dead information and energy in the vacuum of space, or whether this information is alive, meaning it shows all the characteristics that you and I do, including creativity and choice and the ability to make decisions and the ability to choose to do something or not do something, or even lie. In other words, if the information that comes through is not just, quote, historical, but it's interactive and meets all the criteria that we mean to be living consciousness, what that does is, you know the phrase, if it walks like a duck and it talks like a duck and it smells like a duck, it's probably a duck.
Yeah, no. I mean, look, remarkable research, and that particular instance must have left you very much awestruck, but also determined to continue the work.
Absolutely. And for the record, what will be the ultimate proof, which is what we're going to get to shortly, is when we can use technology to show that the information is not dead, but it's interactive, just like you and I are interacting right now.
Which brings us to this project. And look, when I first saw the title, I thought it was a joke. I thought, this cannot be so. Somebody is putting me on, as you say in America, having me on, as we say here in the UK. The idea that you could deploy some kind of technology that would allow you almost to put a trunk call, as we used to call them, to somebody in the afterlife, that seems to defy credulity. But you're working on that.
And not only am I working on it, I've been working on it for a long time. I have a few scientific publications in peer-reviewed scientific journals documenting proof of concept. It's all based on both contemporary physics and literally what the mediums say they experience anyway. And what's very nice about this is that the proof is in the pudding. And so you can determine, not only can you develop a technology which is reliable enough to be used as a communication device, but you can then confirm whether it's accurate for the person or not. So although it sounds science fiction, it's no more science fiction than airplanes were before flight, powered flight.
And the website and the project is called the Soul Phone, which is a fantastic name.
Yeah, well, the simplest way to get to the website that was created by a team of people who wish to help further the work is simply soulphone.org or the soulphonefoundation.org. There are various ways to get to it. The term soul phone was coined by me, and I talk about the metaphor of the evolution from the telephone through the cell phone to the smartphone to now the, quote, soul phone.
I mean, look, the only cases of the dead phoning the living that I've ever read about have been these stories I always took to be apocryphal of supposedly people dying and then a period later a phone going in somebody's house, maybe somebody connected with the dead person, and the dead person being on the other end of the line. That's the only kind of phone of that nature that I've ever heard about.
Right. There have been historically lots of claims. There's what's called trans instrumental communication, people picking up EVPs, electronic voice phenomena, off of radios and but these things have all been, or mostly been, efforts to use technology that was built for another purpose and using it as it normally exists. So they're taking a radio.
There are people, I'm sorry to interrupt, there are people, just while I remember this, there are people who swear by the technology of using white noise. That is the noise that you hear interstation on FM, that hissing noise on old-fashioned FM radio stations. In between stations you get this shh noise, and there are people who have a little box that they will take to a supposedly haunted location, and they will let the white noise play, and some spirit or something they will claim modulates the noise to make sounds.
Right, and the reason why it's not currently used and the reason why there are 0 scientific publications on this work is because it is utterly unreliable. So even if there was some every now and then erratic effect, which there might be, the point is it's utterly impractical. And the approach that I started taking almost a decade ago was to actually look at, if you would, at the physics of spirit and look at what mediums actually report and then use state-of-the-art instrumentation to detect the energy of spirit, not using these simple, inexpensive devices, but using very sophisticated technology. So, for example, the first paper I published in 2010, we used a device called the silicon photomultiplier system. It's a technology that detects single photons of light in a pitch black environment. This technology, a single sensor, costs $2,500. They're used in biomedical imaging. And the question is, if you have one of these sensors hooked up appropriately, and then you have what we call departed hypothesized co-investigators.
Can you give me that again?
Departed hypothesized co-investigators, or just hypothesized collaborating spirits, like Susie Smith, or like, and since I've been going public about this now, I'm not hiding it anymore, Harry, as in literally Harry Houdini. You get people like this, and then you invite them on specific trials to go into a box within a box within a box, i.e. a pitch black environment. And then, and in those days, it was a 5-minute trial, and they would, quote, sit in this box and see whether they could activate and have their, quote, tiny photons picked up with this technology compared to, this is a critical thing, compared to an equal number of control trials where no spirit was invited into the box, so we could get accurate baseline data. So we knew what the noise of the equipment was, as opposed to the presumed increase in photons when specific spirits were intentionally interacting with the equipment.
So what you're saying here is, in the modern era, what we used to call invocation, invoking something, actually works.
Yes, but I would prefer it. I don't know what invocation means. I've never looked up the word. I would prefer to call invitation. We invite spirit to participate. We don't invoke them in the sense of conjure them.
And what is the difference between this and some old medium from the 1920s called Evadne sitting in a darkened room calling for Geronimo?
Well, first of all, what's hugely different is that we have an independent way of verifying whether or not we can get reliable and accurate information, and you can use that technology to eventually, and which is what we're doing right now, the very first step is to call what we call a soul switch, which is a technology that is sufficiently reliable, you know, like pressing a key on a keyboard, so that the first step is to essentially have a yes key and a no key, and then to be able to do 20 questions and confirm whether it's your Aunt Mary or whether it really is Geronimo.
If you can do that, that is astonishing.
Exactly, and it's paradigm changing in science. It's transformative in the sense of its implications for our understanding, for humanity, for business, and for the legal system, for our educational system, and so on. It's a very, very big step, and I can't promise that it's going to be successful, but all the indications are supporting the continuation of the work. The metaphor that I use, Howard, is of what I call it a Wright brothers moment. You know, a little over 110 years ago, there were no airplanes, and we didn't know whether people could fly, and people had tried and failed. But on December 1903, 5 people witnessed the first Wright brother flights. And you may have seen pictures of this open air, wooden and, cloth plane flying.
Yeah, I mean, it looked like a motorized kite.
Yes, perfect. You're very good with words. The first flight lasted all of 12 seconds. The longest flight was 59 seconds. The plane crashed, and then they had to rebuild it. And then the next time they tried to fly it, it crashed again. They couldn't get it up because there wasn't enough breeze to get them off the ground. Then they tried it a third time again another couple of months later, and there was enough breeze and the plane flew. And although people took there were photographs taken, and they were published, it took a couple of years before the public was finally, able to grasp the fact that this was true. But for the 5 people who witnessed that flight, they knew that flight was possible. Now, could those people then, and when I give presentations about this, I ask people to imagine that it's December 1903, okay? There's no fancy lights, no televisions, no radios, nothing that, here I am talking to you in England via Skype. It's incredible. We take, none of this existed. Could we have imagined then, 1903, that in a couple of short generations there'd be these gigantic machines carrying hundreds of people, flying many hundreds of miles an hour, traveling all around the world 24/7? Could we have imagined, which is the case that it is today, in this kind of weather, that literally every heartbeat, every second, somewhere on a planet, a plane is taking off or landing? Obviously, we could not have imagined that. And we could not have imagined that there'd be a brief window of time where you could get a good meal on a plane.
Well, listen, I mean, that's a very good point. But the point that we have to make to our listener, and we always have to think here and respect our skeptical listener, is that at the moment we are staring down the barrel of the possible discovery of life in space. Now, if I think back to when I was a kid, and maybe when you were a kid, Gary, that thought was very much in the realms of science fiction. There were people who would happily talk about it, but most people, and I'm talking even about academic researchers, especially them, in fact, thought that it was probably highly unlikely. I did interviews with people. They thought it was impossible. When I first came into this business some years ago, I did, and we're talking about maybe 2.5 decades ago, I did interviews with people who would say, well, it's a very nice thought, but it is unlikely that we will find anything that's even remotely like us out there. People of that ilk are not saying that now. So the point of the story is, and the point of your story there, is that if you think this is all garbage, think about those examples and then have another think.
Exactly. That's the whole point, that we couldn't have imagined then that radio would become invented and come to planes, and television would be invented and come to planes, and then the World Wide Web would be invented and come to planes. And most amazingly, we could not have imagined then that all of us would take all of this for granted. So what it does is it teaches you humility. It just says, you don't think it's possible now, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's pie in the sky. What we're doing is not pie in the sky. It is based on real science. Am I skeptical about, do I think it's possible that this won't work? Absolutely. No question about it. But if you don't envision and you don't try, you'll never know whether it's going to work or not.
And what sorts of information have you had through, if you'll pardon that expression, so far?
Well, what we've been focused on is developing various technologies that are what are called proof of concept. And what proof of concept means is that you can do formal scientific experiments and get statistically significant results. So, for example, in the very first paper that I published in 2010 in the peer-reviewed scientific journal called Explore. By the way, you know the reason why it was published in that journal?
Mm-hmm.
Because it was one of the few scientific journals in the world that would even entertain the content. There's a great bias or stigma against trying to do this kind of work. So you publish in scientific journals that are open to entertaining the ideas and will look at the data, in an unbiased way.
So you're having a tough time getting this stuff out there?
Yeah, well, in terms of being published in the mainstream, absolutely. Now, having said that, let me just finish the point here, is that even I published a series of papers in that very first paper. There was a paper that worked with a particular hypothesized spirit where we demonstrated statistically that the silicon photomultiplier could be used as a yes-no communication device. However, it wasn't a practical communication device. It took 5 minutes to collect one trial to make one yes response. Okay, that's not practical, and it was only worked 70% of the time. Now, 70% of the time is highly reliable. It can be is statistically significant, but if your keyboard is making 30% errors, you're not going to want to use it. So there's a challenge between going from proof of concept, of which we have multiple technologies, to a working prototype that is practical, i.e., again, that's like the Wright brothers. It's one thing to have a plane that flies some of the time, but you want a plane that's going to be take off virtually all the time.
Well, that's it. You know, the public now has a very little short span of attention, and they want to see something that works. My father used to have on his desk this thing that he'd been given as a present. I might even have bought it for him, from what you call in the States Radio Shack, what we used to call over here Tandy. Same company. This thing was a little box, and it was called, it's so cool, and I wish I still had it. It was called the Executive Decision Maker. And you'd hit the button on it, and you'd ask it a question, and you'd say, "Should I wear the grey suit or the blue suit today? Should it be the blue suit?" You hit the button, and it would go flash, 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 backwards and forwards, and stop on yes. It should be the blue suit. You want to get it to that kind of level, don't you?
Yeah, well, but you want it to be a real communication device as opposed to.
Well, you mean this thing wasn't real then? This was. This was just random flashing lights. Oh, well, Gary, no.
Exactly. But what is more interesting is that there was a 20 questions technology. I forgot what it's called. I bought one, but I've now forgotten the name of it, where you would pick something in your mind, let's say an apple, and then it would ask a series of questions. It would say, is it bigger than a bread box? And you would say yes or no. And then it would say, is it living or deceased, living or non-living? And you would say yes or no. And if you answered accurately, by 20 questions, it would tell you what it was that you were thinking. Now, that was not a trick. That was what's called AI, artificial intelligence. This was highly, structured questioning based on accurate information that you would give the device that was asking the questions. And you could pay $20 for this, and it did this, which is really quite extraordinary. The point here is that, I was raised to be a skeptic, but I'm not a cynic. I'm more skeptical as in questioning or an agnostic. And then what I do is I follow the data. And this is where the data are leading.
Right. Well, keep me posted on the work, because I don't know if anybody else is doing anything like this. And also, on your website for this, soulphone.org, I looked at the team of people who are working on this, and you have some pretty distinguished people who are on board.
Yes, there are many people, and I'm sure that more will join in terms of educational advisors or spiritual advisors to this work. Most academics are afraid to affiliate this right now, because there's, if you would, guilt through association. Somehow the very fact that you would entertain the idea might lead you to be considered questionable in some quarters. However, and we predict that the breakthrough is going to happen with appropriate funding in the next couple of years, that once we have, if we have, a point where we reach, let's say 95% accuracy in the soul switch, and where we can literally demonstrate this live, at that point, it doesn't matter that we haven't published the paper in Science or Nature. And by the way, I have 6 papers in my career published in the journal Science. I was at one time a credible scientist. I haven't stopped doing credible science. I'm just doing it on a seemingly incredible topic.
And well, that's the coolest stuff to do in my book, but I know that there are other people who won't necessarily agree with that. Gary Schwartz, let's park it there for now. Soulphone.org is the website for that. We'll talk about synchronicity next here with Professor Gary Schwartz, a real scientist looking into real cool topics here at The Unexplained.
Across the UK, online and on DAB.
Talk Radio. We'll get you talking.
Hi, I'm here to trade in my trainers.
Trade in your trainers?
Yeah, they're really old. Didn't buy them here. Seen better days, to be honest. I wouldn't get too close. I want to put them towards some lovely new ones.
Sorry, sir, we don't do that.
Really? Vauxhall do? I just got £2,000 for my old banger to put towards a brand new car.
Yes, you can afford a new car. Scrap your old car, and on top of our other great offers, we'll give you £2,000 scrappage to put towards a shiny new Vauxhall. Visit your local retailer or search Vauxhall Scrappage for more information. Trading car registered in your name for at least 90 days. Offer available to individuals and small businesses. UK supplied vehicles only. Exclusions apply. Limited time at participating retailers. Full T's and C's apply.
You know you're Baroque from your rock, from your contemporary jazz, from your German underground progressive minimal techno. But do you know your pension options?
PensionWise is a service set up by the government to provide free, impartial guidance about your pension pot. If you're over 50, call 0800 138 1888 to book your free telephone or face-to-face appointment. PensionWise. Get to know your options.
Score yourself a winner with The Sun. Join me, The Sun's chief football reporter Neil Ashton, for all the latest stats, chats and spats. Our coverage is more pep than Guardiola, tackles opponents tougher than Terry, and scores more winners than our mate Zlatan. Plus, don't miss your number one football pull-out, it's goals. Every Monday, Wednesday, Saturday and Sunday. Go on, pick up The Sun today for just 50p.
My thing, my abs. They're big on Instagram. Well, they were until I dropped a dumbbell on my phone. Anyway, I need a replacement. 12 megapixel camera for maximum muscle definition. But my budget is lower than my body fat ratio. So, you know what? It's got to be refurb.
Russell's thing. It's clearly a refurbished smartphone from eBay. That's as good as new with 12-month seller warranty. Buy refurbished tech on eBay and save up to 50% versus new. eBay. Find your thing.
Talk Radio.
We have ways of making you talk.
In the greatest comeback since Bobby Ewing showed up in Pam Shower.
Hello, I'm James Whale.
The mighty James Whale is back.
You know the one.
The voice of reason returns to Talk Radio.
Unfiltered comment, scorched earth debate, and an ill-advised leather Stetson.
Are you making some kind of joke?
You look ridiculous. Take it off.
Get in the ring with the legendary James Whale.
Are you ready, man?
The dome-headed sage of speech radio returns to the airwaves for 3 hours of essential national night talk.
Cometh the hour, cometh the whale.
The James Whale Show, tonight from 7.
On Talk Radio. We'll get you talking.
The Unexplained with Howard Hughes on Talk Radio.
Final part as we cruise into the Bank Holiday Monday here on Talk Radio with Howard Hughes, The Unexplained. Professor Gary Schwartz is here. He is a real professor doing real science on all the stuff that we love here. We talked about the Soul Phone project last, Gary. I want to talk about synchronicity. We don't have a lot of time to do it, and we will talk much more. And if you'd like to come on my podcast, we can do a longer spell on any of the topics that you want to talk about. I will leave that to you. Synchronicity is something that has been a factor in my life throughout it. Things that I cannot explain of that kind have been happening to me since I was a kid. So I accept that synchronicity may be a real thing, but many people I know do not.
That's correct. In fact, I didn't think it was a real thing. And it wasn't until, and I explain this in my new book called Super Synchronicity, Where Science and Spirit Meet, I explained that it wasn't until I was a tenured professor at Yale and was well established within the mainstream science that I began to experience a statistical anomaly involving, in my case, too many numbers with the that related to the number 11, that I began to realize that there was something odd going on. And it became so statistically improbable that through a then set of other anomalous circumstances, I ended up learning about both synchronicity and about the idea that these kinds of events could occur.
Now look, I keep looking at the clock by my bedside, and it keeps telling me 11:11. You know, it is always 11:11. So there are people all over the world. This sounds crazy if it's never occurred to you. Go online and look at 11:11 because there are people all over the world constantly seeing 11s. And yes. I don't know what that's all about, whether it's just kind of mind over matter. You know, once you've read about it, it starts happening to you. But that happens to me all the time. And I don't quite understand why that is, and I don't quite understand what possible message there might be in those numbers.
You know something, Howard? You have just inspired a great question. Because my journey began with the number 11, okay? Mm-hmm. And I subsequently learned that in history, going back thousands of years, the number 11 turns out to have been a very meaningful number. It's even considered to be a spiritual number, and in fact, this is itself a synchronicity. I was talking to a woman who must remain anonymous a couple of days ago, and literally, as we were having a conversation, it was 11:11, and I actually showed my clock being at 11:11, and showed it to her. And she says, "Oh," she says, 11:11. She says, that's the number of the quote gateway to the gods. Now again, I don't know if she's accurate or not, but here's the point. The point is that the ultimate hypothesis, and I will want to develop this on your blog so people can understand how I was forced to this conclusion by the totality of the evidence. But I ended up coming to the conclusion that there were certain kinds of coincidences which were not only, as Susie Smith used to say, too coincidental to be accidental, but they were so broad, that is, they could even apply to people worldwide, that you had to conclude that there was, as Larry Dossey says, the existence of a universal mind, or what he calls the one mind, or a cosmic consciousness, or a great spirit.
Well, that's what remote viewers claim to tap into, isn't it? That's what they say exists.
That intelligence. But this notion of a universal intelligence or universal mind, and that this universal mind or intelligence could be broadcasted worldwide, maybe even universe-wide, certain patterns of information. And the question is, who's going to pick it up? Who's going to tune into it? And who's going to be able to come in relationship with it? And the number 11 may be one of those, if you would, universal orchestrating transmissions.
But if something is trying to transmit to us and communicate with us, in my case, they failed because, I just kind of go, wow, there's that number again. But I don't know what it means. My producer, Emma, keeps getting 22. That might mean that she is twice as connected. I don't know.
By the way, the number 11, 22, and 33 are considered in the ancient Kabbalah, and of course I learned all this after I started becoming open to this, were considered to be, quote, master numbers. There's reasons for why the numbers are not random in this regard. But yes, what I would say is, I sometimes refer to it as the breadcrumb universe. It's sort of like we're given tiny little hints, but we've got to be Sherlock Holmes to be able to figure out what the intention or the meaning is. And that may itself be intentional.
But meantime, these strange happenings of synchronicity, if you are open to them and if you are able to remember them when they happen, they do happen all the time. Only this evening on my way to this building, there is a big television studio on the south bank of the Thames I have to walk past. It's a big white building. It's very famous. It's the headquarters. People know it here. It's ITV. It used to be London Weekend Television. It is now ITV for the entire commercial television network in this country, one of them. And I used to do an awful lot of voiceover work there on big entertainment shows. It was very strange. I was a journalist, used to do news, but I also had this separate life and this alter ego who used to do voiceovers on game shows and stuff like that, live stuff. It was great fun. 1 minute I'd be at the radio studio telling people some serious news that I'd just written, and then I would, after my shift, go to the TV studio and be the voice on a game show. The point of this story is I was walking towards this building, passing that building, thinking to myself this evening, boy, I miss all that stuff I used to do on television. It was great fun. I did like 10 years of it, and things move on and people leave that organization, so they've kind of forgotten about me, and I'd love to do some more of that stuff. As I'm having that thought, walking towards me is a person who used to produce one of the radio shows that I do. I do a Saturday morning show somewhere else. Her name is Charlie, if she's listening. I told her about this show. And I said, Charlie, how nice to see you. And she was looking great, in fantastic form. She was a very, very talented young woman. And I said, Charlie, what are you doing here? And she said, what are you doing here, Howard? And she said, I work at that building, ITV. Now, I had just been thinking about that. There is somebody from my working past walking towards me who's just come from that building as I'm having the thought, boy, I'd love to work in that building again. Now, that's either nothing at all and just something that you throw away as a story, right, or it's the greatest synchronicity, and I can't work out which.
Well, if you're really, really interested in this, I can help you work it out, seriously. There's a phenomenon, by the way, what I call the VW bug effect. And that is, if you and I talk about VWs, the car, the bug.
I had two of them, yeah.
I only had one. And,
I had one German, one Mexican. It's a long story. The German was the better one, but that's a whole other story.
I'd love to hear it someday. Anyway, as a fellow VW owner. But anyway, the point is, if we have this conversation, and now you get in the car and you start driving, you're going to see VW bugs. Why? Because they're there anyway. They're, quote, independent of you. You just weren't paying attention to them. And people who are skeptical about synchronicity, they assume that all of this is either simply selective attention. You're now looking for number 11, so you're going to notice them, which is not synchronistic. It's merely you're just paying attention. It's called a cognitive bias, or whatever other words you want to use. Or what you're doing is you're misremembering, because most people don't write down every number they ever see on a clock to determine what the percentage of numbers are. So it's a combination of focused attention and failures of memory. Now, it turns out that does account for some people's experiences, but for a lot of it, it doesn't. And it is possible to make a list of potential explanations going from the most conventional to the, if you would, the paranormal, and finally the spiritual. And in my book, where I give countless examples, not countless, I mean there's a good 15 examples of what I call super synchronicities, where there are 6 or more occurrences of a given event occurring within a very short period of time, where the probability of this occurring by chance, if you use any conventional statistics, becomes 1 in a billion or 1 in a trillion or even more than that. And then you look at those patterns and you discover that not only are they not random, but they can have meaning. And that meaning can be useful in terms of one's life. And it's one of those great adventures, and I call it self-science. I explain to people that if you really want to become a serious synchronicity watcher, you have to develop the habit of keeping a journal. You have to develop a habit, if you see a license plate, photograph it. If you have a conversation with somebody and it seems very improbable and meaningful, record it. Now on an iPhone, we can do all this kind of stuff. We can take notes, we can take audio notes, we can take video notes, we can take pictures. I actually have an email account where I send synchronous information, including super synchronicities, and a few other meaningful things that I want to keep track of. And that's all I use this account for, so that I know that I can have a record of this, and it's, quote, in the cloud. And when you keep track of these kinds of things, that's when you can better evaluate when is it merely a coincidence and when is it, quote, too coincidental to be accidental.
We have to talk more about this. Please come on my podcast at theunexplained.tv. We can talk to the world about this if you're willing to do it. I'd love to talk with you. Because listen, I'm somebody who's been researching this synchronicity thing all my life, and I want to believe, and there's more evidence than I would have time to go on the radio with here, and some of it's private stuff anyway. But more evidence that I've got that life is not random. But I may be a fool, and people have called me a fool before. We'll never know. If people want to find out about your work, Gary, where do they go?
They can go to DrGarySchwartz, drgaryschwartz.com, and that'll take them to some of my work. Or they can go, of course, to soulphone.org.
Okay, you wanted to make one point. The music's rolling underneath us now, but please make that point, Gary.
I can't wait to hear some of your synchronicities, and I want you. Here's what I'd love you to do, Howard.
Okay.
Read the book before we have the interview.
All right. Well, if you can send me a link to that material, we will do it. We'll make that happen. Gary, we're out of time. Thank you so much. It's taken months to get you on the show, and it's been worth it. I've loved this conversation. Thank you. Have a good night.
You too. Thank you.
Professor Gary Schwartz, remarkable man doing great research. That's it. Thank you very much to my producer, Emma. Thank you very much to my technical producer, who we'll call the man with no name for tonight, because he likes to keep an air of mystique. And until next we meet here on The Unexplained on the radio, my name is Howard Hughes, and please stay safe, stay calm, and above all, stay in touch. Take care, please. Good night.
Election 2017 on Talk Radio.
Results, analysis and updates from the campaigning all the way to the final count.
Can I quote you on that?
Join the conversation party
on your election station.
Our fortunes prosper well.
Talk Radio.
Time for another round of Sounds Fantastic. What's this sound?
Football, racing and kabaddi. Every Friday he shares his tips live on air because when it comes to form, he's their daddy. Don't miss Paddy's Punts every Friday afternoon with Hawksby and Jacobs on Talk Sport with Paddy Power. Get a punter's eye view of all the form, the boot room rumours and where the smart money's going from across the sporting planet. Don't miss Paddy's Punts every Friday afternoon with Hawksby and Jacobs on Talk Sport with Paddy Power. You beauty.
Score yourself a winner with The Sun. Join me, The Sun's chief football reporter Neil Ashton, for all the latest stats, chats and spats. Our coverage is more pep than Guardiola, tackles opponents tougher than Terry, and scores more winners than our mate Zlatan. Plus, don't miss your number one football pullout. It's goals every Monday, Wednesday, Saturday and Sunday. Go on, pick up The Sun today for just 50p.
Let's make more of the garden, because right now at Wickes there's 3 for 2 across gardens and landscaping, including all decking and wood care. Wickes, let's do it right. Exclusions apply.
Hey, I'm Lee Reedy. This song's about Oasis drinks. I'm selling notes, singing this song. Your liquid loving stops it feeling wrong. I sold my soul to the marketing team, but the money's good and the Oasis drinks are free. Oasis, it's hashtag fresh stuff. Oasis, buy a bottle 'cause it just ain't enough.
On digital radio and 1089 and 1053 AM. Talk Sport.
A week on from the deadly bombing in Manchester, 13 suspects remain in custody with police raids still ongoing. A 25-year-old and a 19-year-old were arrested yesterday in the Old Trafford and Gorton areas. The Home Secretary's defended the work of the security services after reports warnings about the bombing were not followed up. Police analyst Graham Wetton says questions need to be asked about resources.
There needs to be a sensible, balanced conversation and discussion about the level of resources that the security services have, GCHQ, the police service, etc., security services, to deal with the threat they face currently. It has to be balanced, has to be reviewed, and people have to have a sensible look at this and make sensible decisions.
British Airways could be facing huge compensation costs after thousands of passengers were stranded over the bank holiday weekend by a global IT crash. Delayed travellers are able to claim compensation under EU law. Air travel experts say BA is likely to face a massive cost in lost revenue, as well as payouts to customers whose flights were cancelled. Branding expert Jonathan Garbe says the airlines handled it all wrong.
What they've forgotten about is the C of communication. And there has been a total lack of communication. It's all great that they're saying that they're going to, put a refund out as soon as possible, but that doesn't really mean anything to the people who are stranded out there.
Japan has protested after North Korea fired a short-range Scud missile that landed in the Sea of Japan. The North has increased its testing of ballistic missiles in recent months. South Korea's President Moon has called an urgent meeting of the country's National Security Council. The sports championship leader Sebastian Vettel is now 25 points ahead of Lewis Hamilton after winning the Monaco F1 Grand Prix. England's rugby union side have continued their winning habit and under-strength side beat the Barbarians 28-14 at Twickenham. And Hamilton will be playing Scottish football, Premiership football again next season after beating Dundee United. That's the latest. I'm Kevin Gover.
Talk Sport. Sports Update.
I'm Andrew Hawes. It's safety first for England's cricketers ahead of the ICC Champions Trophy. Moeen Ali, Ben Stokes and Chris Woakes won't be risked in the final one-day international with South Africa, thanks to a variety of injuries. There are call-ups for Middlesex's Steve Finn, Toby Ronan-Jones and Hampshire's Liam Dawson. You can hear the Champions Trophy next month on TalkSport 2. Blackpool have won